Our scripture today comes from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, and we hear these words for us this morning. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. May we share a word of prayer together. Holy One, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be strengthening and pleasing to you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, today we'll be talking about the nature of loss and sitting with loss. I start with a quote by Carl Jung that once said, "Embrace your grief, for there your soul will grow." Or Alan Wolfelt, who once says that we make grief our friend, which seems kind of like an odd thing to say. The last thing you want to do is make grief your friend. You're usually trying to navigate through grief. You'd rather not befriend grief. But one of the things we naturally do as human beings when a loss is incurred in our life, we as human beings are prone to do everything we can do in our power to avoid dealing with that loss. We're good at avoiding loss. We don't want loss to take up residence in our life. We'd rather get past it in some way. And we don't want loss just to kind of sit there for too long. And so we play the avoidance game. It can be painful and emotionally difficult to wrestle with whatever loss we have in our life. And the other challenge with loss is we tend to navigate loss alone, by ourselves. I often think one of the myths that is kind of a horrible myth for our country is the rugged individualism that we put upon ourselves in this country. I'm going to fix it myself. I'm going to do it myself. I don't need help from anyone else. I can solve this problem on my own. And when we try to do that, more times than not, we never really deal with the loss that we've encountered in our life. So we do things like distraction and avoidance when it comes to loss. I'm going to be busy myself doing the dishes. I'm going to go take a drive. I'm going to do something other than think about the loss of my life. I'm going to distract myself so I don't have to deal with it or wrestle with it in some kind of way. The challenge is when we face loss head on, it can be hard and painful. It can be sad, disappointing, frustrating, depressing. All those things happen with loss. The challenge is when we avoid it or put it off, what ends up usually happening, it usually comes out in anger or disappointment targeted at other people. When we don't deal with ourselves, we end up moving those emotions and pushing them on someone else when we least expect it, not having that be the things we really wanted to do in the first place, but that's how it manifests itself. And so there's a cadre of losses that we encounter in various forms, and just name a few of those. The obvious loss is the loss of someone that we love dearly that has passed away or died. And it's a challenging thing to lose someone we love, someone we care for, someone we miss their presence with us. And the death of someone is probably the most obvious loss that we navigate in our world. But there's all different kinds of losses that are out there that have various weights to them that give energy to our emotions. One of those could be just the deterioration of good health. Or you have some incident, an accident, or some health issue. I know for me, I kind of shared this in first service, one of my bucket list items for me was, I was a soccer player for 20 years. One of my bucket list items was to play soccer on international soil. And so I had an opportunity for that 2 years ago when our group made a trip to El Agarral in El Salvador, and I coaxed a bunch of the guys in the community that were much younger than me to play a soccer match on the grounds at their soccer field. And it took a little bit for them to all show up. We finally all showed up and started our game. 10 minutes into the game, I'm huffing and puffing. I'm going, I was much better at this years ago than I am now. I could just feel like I'm just not as capable on the field as I used to. And at some point, I was running, trying to catch up with one of the other players we were playing against. I fell forward on my chest, ended up bruising my chest in the process with my goal of playing soccer on an international soil. I'm like, my body is not what it used to be. We all navigate that with our bodies in terms of not having our bodies be where, and there's a sense of loss, of not being able to do the things you used to do. At the same time, sometimes it's not our body, it's our mind that doesn't work the way we want it to. I mean, I think one of the greatest evils we encounter is dementia, Alzheimer's, memory loss, and how challenging that is, and the loss that goes with to be able to be the person you want to be. I've equally navigated just in more recent times my own health of recovering from bronchitis and not having my voice and not being where I want to be. And we all have various losses we navigate with health. We have job losses, broken relationships. It could be a broken relationship within your family or a close friend. Or sometimes broken relationships just kind of naturally deteriorate over time without you really noticing. You had a longtime friend, and over time you just didn't talk as much as you used to, didn't connect like you used to when you were younger. And next thing you know, 20 years goes by and you finally connect up and you're just not, it's not the same as it used to be. And like you believe different things or behave differently. And there's a sense of loss of those relationships that were once strong that are not strong anymore. Or maybe there's a sense of loss, at least these days, many people feel the loss or the deterioration of democracy in our country, and what it means to navigate our political and public square together, what that might mean. Or the sense of loss of the unrest in the world, the wars that are happening between countries, the natural disasters that happen all over the place, and thousands of people through a hurricane or tsunami or fire or some natural disaster wipes out communities, and you can see in the news just the loss and the tragedy that happens around the world. We see the loss with our climate and climate change, and knowing that we as human beings are probably the major player of the expeditious move toward the changes in our climate, the things we see in our world around us, that the human population is one of the main top reasons by a long shot of the heating of our global planet and how we care for our planet. Or maybe it's the loss of how we respect the dignity of another person, or another person feeling as though their dignity is not honored or celebrated in some way. We see that with the immigration and the immigrant population, with the refugee population. We're seeing in the LGBTQ population of someone not being able just to be themselves and being targeted by others of power and privilege. Or we see the loss of the access to basic food needs. I mean, this month we're collecting peanut butter and brown rice for our food stock in the city that's low, where people are striving just to get basic necessities on their table. We're helping the Kickapoo tribe with diapers and food. It seems like all these needs of just, how am I going to get my next meal, and the loss of just basic things in life. Or maybe access and the loss of quality health care and getting access to health care and being able to have wellness checks and immunizations and the basic things to care for yourself. All these losses that we encounter in our life, and the challenge of it's hard enough to have one loss, but if we're really honest about it, we don't move from loss to loss. It's not how loss works. Our losses are layered. They're on top of one another. If you went through this list, we probably have 4 or 5 losses that I'm going through in my life at any given time. So it's not just one loss, it's multiple losses at once. They're layered, and they create multiple complexities of our emotional state, our sense of health, and how do we get through all this stuff? We have all these things going on that seem to be pulling us down or giving hardship to our life. One of the things I think is helpful with thinking about the various losses we have in our life is what I call a framing of loss. How do we frame our sense of loss. It's be able to name it. Well, it's a health issue, it's a death, it's a dignity piece, or there's that kind of naming. But sometimes it's helpful to widen the lens and to see a greater framing of loss. And there's a gentleman by the name of Francis Weller who talks about the gates of sorrow, which there's some people in the church. Back in January, I had a special evening service where we celebrated and honored what I would call the gates of sorrow. And Francis Weller talks about 5 gates of sorrow that help people frame what they're thinking about and how they think about their loss in a larger context. The first gate of sorrow is this: everything that we love, we will lose. There's a sense that gate of sorrow is a reminder to us of the finitude of the world in which we live, ourselves as well as the world. There's nothing that's permanent or eternal in nature. So everything that we love, a person, things that we like to be involved in, everything that we love, at some point we will lose. I remember seeing a cartoon once in which there is a hearse with this big trailer back behind it, and it basically says, you can't take it with you. The idea that there's this finitude part of life, the things like we're going to save up and take it all with us, we have this inability and recognition of our humanity and what that means for us. So that first gate of sorrow, everything we love, we will lose. The second gate of sorrow, the places that have not known love. That's a powerful phrasing. The places that have not known love. I mean, we know biblically that if there was one word, if we were to wrap up the Bible in one word, it would simply be agape, or unconditional love. To know there are places where love has not been experienced or felt. To couch your loss in that kind of way. The third gate is called the sorrows of the world. We look at the news and the media, and we see all the things that are happening both domestically, internationally, and we can see the sorrow of the world and what all that means and how we take that in. The fourth gate of sorrow is what we expected but did not receive. And one of our greatest allies and enemies is what we have in our minds of expectations about things. And we are good at setting up expectations that are false or too lofty for our world. Doesn't mean you can't be positive about things you want to do, but we set up a lot of expectations for ourselves and others, and a lot of times those never get realized, and some of the loss of unmet expectations. And the last gate of sorrow is called ancestral grief. The recognition of the grief of your family lineage, history, as well as our country lineage and history, as well as our biblical lineage and history, and all the loss that comes with ancestral grief along the way. The other thing I would say about loss that's not new to us, but just framing it as we're talking about it today, is the idea we never get over a loss. Well, I finally conquered that loss in my life. That's not how loss works. Loss is something that lingers and stays with us our entire life. Once a loss is incurred, it will stay a part of our psyche and our worldview for the rest of our lives. And so we must ask ourselves, what does loss tell us about ourselves as we're living the days of our life? How do we navigate loss if we don't get over loss? And loss has a way of creeping back in. So I tell a story. When I was a junior in college and was at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, one of the joys of not only going to college was I had immediate access to my grandparents who lived in Fort Worth. And at the time when I moved to Fort Worth, they were my grandparents. And I made a weekly visit to their house for 2 reasons: free laundry and free food. That was a good incentive to go over there, and was able to accomplish things almost all of my college time. And one of the side benefits that I did not know as I was a college student, as I went to my grandparents for laundry and food, is the transition of the relationship between me and my grandparents. Over that 2.5-year period before my grandfather passed in the middle of my junior year, my grandparents had gone from family and grandparents to some of my closest friends. I had never imagined that an 80-year-old man would become my best friend. But my grandfather became that to me in that 2.5 years before his passing. The day of his death, my mom called me early in the morning, it was the midweek, to tell me that my grandfather had died. And kind of a little side note that we counted up, when he had gone in the hospital for his cancer, when the day he died, we counted up he was actually in the hospital 40 days and 40 nights, which no coincidence that, but thought being a minister, kind of interesting that he was there 40 days, 40 nights before his passing. My mom called me and goes, "What would you like to do?" I says, "I just want to go to class. I'm just going to go to class today." So I got ready. I went to the campus. I never made it to class. I just kept wandering around campus, and I didn't know why I was wandering and never made it into the classroom. What I didn't know as I was wandering campus, not knowing what to do with myself, my family had called the school for them to contact me, found my school calendar or my schedule, went to talk to the teachers, and all the teachers said, "Chris hadn't been here. He's not been to any of the classes that I was assigned to go to." And so the school was looking for me and could not find me. My parents were looking for me. I was somewhere in campus, and where I was walking, where they were walking, we never met paths. I eventually decided to make my way to the dean of students. And I thank God today for Libby Proffer, who was the dean of students at the time. She knew me and she knew my family. I walked in, the first response was, "Where have you been? We've been looking for you for 2 or 3 hours." "Well, I've been on campus." "You've been on campus this whole time?" "Well, I've just been wandering. I didn't know what to do with myself. My grandfather died, and I didn't know what to do, what to say, and I was just kind of on my own. I didn't know where to go." So she sat and she just listened to me talk about my grandfather a little bit. She says, "I'm going to do you a favor. I'm just going to take you in my car and drive you to your family. I think you need to be with your family. Just let me give you a ride." So we left campus. She drove me to our family's house and got to be with my family. And I remember that, and I thought, after a period of time of navigating through that, I thought I reached the point that I could tell stories, intimate stories about my grandfather and I. 15 years later, I was preaching a story about my grandfather. I got halfway through the story, and tears started going down my cheeks. I'm thinking, I should be better than this. It's 15 years. Surely I could tell the story without crying. But loss is not something we get over. It stays with us over a period of time, and it creeps and surprises us when those memories or moments come that surprise us about how that loss is still an evident part of our life. And so we have this passage from Matthew today. And he talks about this. "Come to me, all of you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." Jesus is talking, and he uses the image of a yoke. He uses images in first century world that people would have known. First century world, primarily agrarian, farmers working the land. And when Jesus uses the image of yoke, they get it. They know what a yoke is. They know what its purpose is. They know its function. And so he uses that kind of image and metaphor to talk about the human journey. And one of the things we know about a yoke is I actually looked it up, because I basically know what a yoke is, but I wanted to look up more than just what I knew. There are 3 functions of a yoke. The first is easing the burden of that which you carry, and Chuck talked about that with the kids today. If something's heavy, you need a yoke so you can disperse the weight, so you don't have to have all the weight on you. You can share that weight with somebody else or with God in your life. So the first is easing the weight of the burden. The second function of a yoke is when that yoke is placed on the shoulders of the animal, it stabilizes the animal. It gives stability to the animal and their ability to function for the task that's in front of them. And the last thing that a yoke does, you think about the yoke and the ropes that are connected to the yoke, is a yoke is there to offer guidance and direction as that cattle or animal makes its way forward. So a yoke does three things. It lessens the burden, provides stability, and offers guidance. And so when Jesus is speaking to those that he is speaking to and uses this metaphor, he was saying, this loss that you feel, this burden that you feel, was never meant to be something you carry alone. It was meant to be done in the company of others. So what is Jesus telling us in this passage? First of all, is that healing is first, the path of healing is first begun the moment we name our loss. One of the hardest things about loss is being able to name it. Sometimes we can feel it, but don't know what the actual loss is. We can feel it before we can name it. That sometimes comes up, particularly, I guess a perfect example would be health kinds of things. Someone's not feeling well, or something's not right. They go to the doctor. Well, we'll need to run some tests before we can figure out what's going on. Probably the most anxiety-provoking thing is the distance between not feeling well and getting an accurate diagnosis. That in-between zone is one of the hardest parts in the health journey. Not that actually going through whatever it is you have to navigate through isn't difficult, but when you don't know yet, your mind travels in 1,000 directions. It could be this, it could be that. You go on the internet and it scares you to death about the possibilities of what that is. When you don't know what it is, your anxiety level are beyond the roof. And so naming the loss, job loss, death of a loved one, health concern, lack of dignity, whatever the loss is, being able to name it is the first step in the healing process as we navigate through loss. The other is Jesus tells us that healing is never done alone. It is meant to be done in the company of other people. Healing through loss is actually sitting with the loss and not doing the avoidance distractions that fill our time. It's actually having a conversation about the loss itself. Though it's difficult, there's something powerful about talking about the very loss that we're navigating with. A person, an experience, a thing, it doesn't matter. To be able to talk about it is critical along the way versus doing something to circumvent that loss. The other piece is that healing through loss is meant to be intentionally knowing the absence of that loss, but we also recognize the presence at the same time. I mentioned my grandfather. He died in 1991. It is now 2025. I still feel my grandfather's presence powerfully today as I did when he was still living. It doesn't replace his physical presence, but there's something powerful about my grandfather still being a living part of me every day because I'm intentional about including the memory of him in me all the time. And it's not just him. It is the chorus of witnesses of people that I've lost. I've got this chorus of people and voices in my head that even though they're absent from me, at the same time, they are present to me at the same time. So I offer us three paths as we navigate loss, as we think about the things that Jesus is telling us with this yoke imagery, is that we need trusted people that we can call and they will respond to us at a moment's notice. Sometimes it's a family member, sometimes it's a friend, a counselor, therapist, minister. We all need somebody, and the somebody shouldn't be a talker in the moments you need them the most. They should be a listener. If you get that person and they're a talker, and I'm a talker, I can also be a listener, but you need someone when they need to talk, you need to be quiet as a listener. You need to let them tell their story. And sometimes the best response is not a response. Sometimes the best response is an arm around the shoulder or a hug or just being in the space with someone so they know they're not alone in those moments. So we need trusted people. The second thing I would say is not only do we need individual people, we need communal spaces with our losses. And church is a tremendous gift in that we have each other when we navigate loss and the layered losses that we navigate together. When there is the loss of a person, one of the great gifts, it's not the only thing we do when there's the loss of a person, but we have a service, a funeral service, celebration of life, however we name the service that we have for a loved one. There's something where we're in the space together and we hear scripture and prayer and songs and stories and details about that person, is that we get to collectively remember and celebrate a life together. And we do that together. The whole community can navigate that with each other and not feel like we're alone in the process. So it's not just having a trusted person. Secondarily, we need a trusted community. We can trust each other and be vulnerable with one another. If we can't be vulnerable in the midst of loss, we will be relegated to do that on our own, and we know that's not the answer to loss. The third thing I would say is that grief or loss has a kind of a continuum partner to it. And the partner to grief and loss is gratitude. We have to partner those two things together. I mentioned I did a service back in January that was the Gates of Sorrow. And the sanctuary was set up with the 5 gates of sorrow around the perimeter of the room. And we left open space for people to go to ancestral grief, or places people that had not felt love, or all that we love we will lose. And we let just silence and let people navigate to the tables they wanted to go to name their losses and to be in silence about that. But we did that together as community. At the end of the service, we had people come up, we had candles on the table, and we had people, they didn't have to speak, but we had people light candles on the table, and the light was something they were grateful for, something they wanted to give gratitude for in their life. And so the perimeter of the room was loss, and the center of the room was gratitude. It is easy for us to complain about something, or to have negativity in our mind, or to have losses in our life. And we can name a host of them. But if we partner that with gratitude, I would dare guess, and I can't say this for sure, I don't have statistics on this, but I would guess if we listed our sorrows or losses and we listed our gratitudes outnumber the losses by a large margin. If we really sit down and think of the things we are grateful for in our life, the people we are grateful for, the experiences we have, the things we have learned along the way far exceed the losses. Not to diminish the loss, but to put loss in perspective of the larger landscape of life. So you need a trusted person, a trusted community, and the infusion of gratitude in your life as we sit with the losses in our life. Dietrich Bonhoeffer has an extended quote about loss that I want to share with us this morning. He says this: "Nothing can make up for the absence of someone whom we love, and it would be wrong to try to find a substitute. We must simply hold out and see it through." That sounds very hard at first, but at the same time, it's a great consolation. For the gap, as long as it remains unfilled, preserves the bonds between us. It is nonsense to say that God fills the gap. God doesn't fill it, but on the contrary, keeps it empty, and so helps us to keep alive our former communion with each other, even at the cost of pain. When we sit with loss, it is never an easy thing to do, but when we avoid the loss, we do ourselves ever greater harm along the way. Jesus knew when he spoke in Matthew 11, or at least we have it recorded in Matthew 11, when he talks about the yoke, come and find rest. We could quickly slip through that passage and just skip over those 3 little verses. But what a gift those 3 verses are about the nature of community and navigating the hardest parts of life that we endure together. So as we sit with loss, we're also creating a path of healing along the way.